The universe has a funny way of teaching you who really matters. One moment you think you've built something solid, a marriage, a friendship, a life, and the next you're standing there like an idiot while it all crumbles between your fingers. My name is Alexander Brown. I'm 43 and until 3 months ago I thought I knew what my life was. Turns out I was the punchline to a joke I didn't even know was being told. It was my birthday. 43 years on this planet, 15 of them married to Laura. We'd built what I thought was a good life in the suburbs of Minneapolis. My transportation company wasn't huge, but it was profitable, respectable. We had the house with the pool, the friends who came over for barbecues, the routines that felt like security. Laura had quit teaching a few years back, saying she wanted to focus on her personal brand on Instagram. I supported her, like I always did. Why wouldn't I? Thomas Gray had been in our lives for nearly a decade. He was that friend who always knew someone, always had an angle on some new investment opportunity, always had a story that topped yours. I never fully trusted him, but Laura thought he was brilliant. He understands how the world really works, she'd say. I'd nod and think, yeah, and he'd sell his mother for the right price. I'd invited just a few people over for dinner that night. Nothing flashy, good steaks, expensive bourbon, the kind of evening where you can relax with people who matter. Thomas arrived 20 minutes late with a bottle of scotch that cost more than he could afford unless his latest sure thing had actually paid off. Laura wore that red dress I'd bought her for Valentine's Day. Her hair was done differently, something with more volume that she'd been experimenting with lately. When Thomas walked in, something shifted in the air. I felt it but ignored it. The way you ignore the first whiff of smoke, convincing yourself it's just someone's cooking. We were halfway through dinner, the conversation flowing as smoothly as the alcohol, when I noticed it. Laura's hand disappearing under the table, not on her lap, on Thomas's thigh. Her wedding ring caught the light from our dining room chandelier as her fingers traced slow patterns on his leg. She didn't even try to hide it. Worse, when she caught me looking, she held my gaze with a challenge in her eyes I'd never seen before. I tried to salvage something from the moment. Seems like everyone's enjoying themselves tonight, I said, my voice coming out colder than I intended. That's when she said it. My wife of 15 years, looking me dead in the eye, said, "If you don't like it, Alex, you can leave. We're having fun." Thomas laughed, not embarrassed, not uncomfortable, triumphant, like he'd won something. Like I was the fool at the table who didn't understand the game everyone else was playing. "You can't be serious," I said, my grip tightening around my fork. I looked at the other guests, our neighbors, the Millers, and my colleague Dave with his wife Sarah. They all suddenly became intensely interested in their plates, except for Sarah, whose eyes darted between us with undisguised fascination. "Oh, I'm serious," Laura said, her voice carrying a hint of wine-soaked bravado. Thomas and I were just discussing how stifling suburban life can be, how people get trapped in routines, forgetting to actually live. Thomas leaned back in his chair, a smug smile playing on his lips. "Life's too short for pretense, isn't it, Alex? In movies, this is where the husband flips the table, throws a punch, makes a scene, but I just felt this strange calm washing over me, like I was watching the scene from somewhere else. I stood up slowly, placed my napkin beside my half-eaten steak, and grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. "Thank you," I said, looking at both of them. "Now I know exactly where I stand." "Alex, come on," Dave started, half rising from his seat. "Let's not—" I raised my hand to stop him. "It's fine. Enjoy the rest of dinner. The bourbon's on the bar if anyone wants more." And I walked out. No drama, no slamming doors, just the quiet click of our front door closing behind me. I drove aimlessly for hours, the Minneapolis skyline glittering in my rearview mirror. Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot of a roadside motel on the outskirts of town. I didn't go in immediately, just sat in my car, staring at nothing, feeling something crystallize inside me. My phone kept lighting up with texts from Laura. "Where are you? You're being ridiculous. Come home so we can talk about this like adults." Then Dave. "Checked on Laura. Everyone's gone home. You okay, man?" I ignored them all. A light rain began to fall, streaking the windshield, blurring the neon vacancy sign. I thought about the last 15 years. The compromises, the plans, the trust. I'd always prided myself on being level-headed, rational. The guy who didn't fly off the handle, who found solutions instead of creating more problems. But what was the solution here? What was the rational response to having your life torn apart at your own dinner table? I finally checked into the motel under my middle name, James. The room smelled like discount cleaning products and desperation, but it was quiet. I lay on the bed fully clothed, staring at water stains on the ceiling that looked like continents on a map of a world I didn't recognize anymore. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Travis Nichols had worked it for my company years ago before starting his own security consulting business. We'd stayed in loose contact, the occasional beer when our paths crossed. He answered on the third ring. "Alex, man, it's been a minute. Everything okay?" "Not really," I said, "but I'm handling it. I need some specialized equipment. Discreet stuff. Can I buy you breakfast?" 2 hours later, we were sitting in a booth at a diner far enough from my neighborhood that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. Travis listened without interrupting as I laid out what I needed. "So basically, you want to turn your house into a surveillance operation without anyone knowing," he summarized, stirring his coffee. "I want to see with my own eyes what's happening in my home when I'm not there," I corrected him. "I'm not looking to gather evidence for court. I just need to know the truth." Travis studied me for a long moment. "This isn't like you, Alex." "Maybe that's the problem," I said. "Maybe I've been too much like me for too long." Travis listened without judgment, his expression serious as I explained what I needed. "So you want to know what's really happening in your house," he summarized, keeping his voice low. "Exactly," I said. "I need to see the truth with my own eyes." Travis studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. "I can do it. But Alex, be prepared for what you might find. Some truths are harder to face than uncertainty." "I'm already facing the worst," I replied. "At least this way I'll know for sure." Travis accepted the envelope I slid across the table. "When do you want to do this?" 3 days later, while Laura was at her weekly yoga class, Travis installed 4 cameras in our house. One in the living room, disguised as a smoke detector. One in the kitchen, hidden in a new digital picture frame I'd bought as a surprise for Laura. One overlooking the pool area, camouflaged as part of the outdoor speaker system. And one in our bedroom, tucked into the bookshelf where Laura never looked because she didn't read anything that wasn't on her phone anymore. All feeds went directly to a secure cloud server that only I could access. Travis was thorough, professional, and asked exactly 0 personal questions, which is why I'd called him in the first place. "These are motion activated," he explained as we tested the system from my laptop in a coffee shop downtown. "You'll get alerts on your phone when they detect movement. The resolution is high enough to identify faces clearly, even in low light." I watched as the screen showed Laura entering our house, dropping her yoga mat by the door, checking her reflection in the hall mirror. A perfectly normal moment in a life that no longer felt like mine. "How long will the cloud storage keep the footage?" I asked. 30 days by default, but you can download anything you want to keep permanently." I nodded, trying not to think about what I might need to keep permanently. That night, I told Laura I needed some space to think. I'd rented a small apartment downtown for a while. "What, like a separation?" Her voice wavered between anger and panic. "Call it whatever you want," I said, packing a suitcase. "I call it taking a step back to reevaluate things." "This is ridiculous, Alex. It was just some harmless flirting. You're blowing everything out of proportion." I zipped up the suitcase. "Maybe, but I need some time." "Time for what? To punish me?" I looked at her then, really looked. The woman I'd built my life with, the face I'd woken up to for 15 years. Suddenly, she seemed like a stranger wearing my wife's features. "Time to see clearly," I said. Her face hardened. "Fine. Run away. That's what you do best anyway, isn't it? When things get uncomfortable, when real emotions are involved, you check out. You always have." I shouldered my bag, ignoring the barb. "I'll call you in a few days." "Don't bother," she snapped, turning away. But as I reached the bedroom door, she called after me, "This is your fault too, you know. You've been absent for years. Physically here, but mentally gone. What did you expect?" I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "I expected loyalty, Laura, basic human decency. If you were unhappy, you could have said something. We could have worked on it or ended things cleanly. But this? This was a choice. I settled into the apartment downtown. It was small but modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. During the day, I went to work, ran my company, made decisions, signed contracts. At night, I came back to my temporary home and sometimes checked the feeds from the house. For 11 days, nothing noteworthy happened. Laura went about her routine. Yoga classes, coffee with friends, hours spent staging photos for Instagram in various corners of our house. She called me several times a day, alternating between anger, manipulation, and tearful apologies. I kept our conversations brief, non-committal. On the 12th day, everything changed. I was reviewing some contracts when my phone chimed with an alert from the security system. Motion detected in the pool area. It was Tuesday afternoon, 2:17 p.m. Laura was supposed to be at her yoga class until 3:30. I opened the feed and watched as my wife and Thomas emerged from the house onto the pool deck. She was laughing, her head tilted back, a glass of what looked like champagne in her hand. He had his arm around her waist, fingers splayed possessively across her hip. "To new beginnings," I heard Thomas say, the outdoor microphone picking up his voice clearly despite the ambient noise of the pool filter. "Aren't you jumping the gun a little?" Laura replied, but she was smiling. "He's only been gone 2 weeks. Trust me, he's not coming back. Not after what he saw. Men like Alex, they can't handle being disrespected. Their ego won't let them." Laura took a long sip of her champagne. "You seem awfully confident about my marriage." "I'm confident about us," Thomas said, pulling her closer. "I've waited long enough, don't you think?" They kissed by the edge of the pool, not the hesitant kiss of people crossing a line for the first time, but the familiar, hungry kiss of lovers who'd done this many times before. I watched, feeling strangely detached, as they undressed each other and slipped into the water. Into the pool I'd had built 3 summers ago as an anniversary surprise for Laura. I downloaded the video and closed my laptop. Over the next 3 weeks, I collected more evidence than I ever wanted to see. They were careful, but not careful enough. They met at our house when they thought I was at work. Sometimes they went to his apartment across town. Once they checked into a hotel using my credit card, either a stupid mistake or a deliberate insult. I couldn't tell which was worse. The most painful video came on our wedding anniversary. I'd sent flowers to the house out of habit, with a neutral card that said simply, "Thinking of you today." That night, Laura brought Thomas into our bed, with my flowers visible on the nightstand beside them. After witnessing this particular betrayal, I broke my own rule and called her. "Did you get the flowers?" I asked when she answered, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "Yes," she said, sounding slightly caught off guard. "Thank you. They're beautiful. Did you enjoy them?" There was a pause. "Alex, what's this about?" "Just wondering if you and Thomas enjoyed the flowers I sent while you were fucking in our bed." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear her breathing change. "What are you talking about?" she finally managed, but her voice had already given her away. "Don't insult me by lying," Esfeda said. "Not anymore." "You're spying on me?" Now there was real anger in her voice. "You put cameras in our house? That's illegal. Is that really the hill you want to die on right now, Laura? Legality?" She hung up. I expected her to call back immediately, to rage or cry or threaten. Instead, nothing. Silence for 3 days. Then she texted, "We need to talk, face to face." We met at a coffee shop downtown. I went straight to the point. "How long?" I asked. 6 months, she admitted, staring into her untouched coffee. 6 months of lies, of coming home to me, of sleeping beside me, of making plans together. "He made me feel alive," she said defensively. "When was the last time you looked at me the way he does?" "When was the last time you gave me the chance?" I countered. She eventually asked, "What happens now?" "Now I protect myself," I said, "and you face consequences." I saved every video, labeled them meticulously with dates and times, and stored them in an encrypted folder. Not for divorce court, Minnesota is a no-fault state anyway, but because something in me needed to document the dismantling of my life with the same attention to detail I'd used to build it. During this time, I also discovered that Thomas had convinced Laura to sign as guarantor on loans totaling nearly $2 million for his risky development projects, a decision that would soon come back to haunt them both. I decided to confront Thomas directly, not about the affair, but about the loans. I called him and suggested meeting for a drink to clear the air. He sounded surprised but agreed readily enough. Perhaps he thought I was going to plead for my marriage, give him the satisfaction of seeing me broken. We met at an upscale bar downtown where neither of us was likely to run into people we knew. He arrived 15 minutes late, of course, with that same smug smile he'd worn at my dinner table. "Alex," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Good to see you. How have you been?" "Cut the crap, Thomas," I said quietly. "We're not friends anymore. We're not even pretending." He had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "Look, I know things are awkward right now, but I'm not here to talk about Laura," I interrupted. "I'm here to talk about your Riverside development project." That got his attention. The confidence in his expression flickered. "What about it?" "I'm curious about your financing structure, specifically about how you convinced my wife to guarantee loans for a project that any competent financial analyst can see is undercapitalized by at least 30%. Thomas recovered quickly, his smile returning. "Laura believes in the project. She sees the potential where others might not. Laura doesn't know commercial real estate from a hole in the ground. What she knows is you. What did you tell her to get her signature on those documents?" He shrugged, taking a sip of his drink. "I simply shared the opportunity. She made her own decision." "Did you explain the personal liability involved? Did you mention that if the project fails, she's on the hook for millions?" "The project isn't going to fail," he said, but there was a defensive edge to his voice now. "No, because I've had some interesting conversations with the zoning board this week. Seems there's some concerns about environmental impact that weren't adequately addressed in your proposal. Could delay approval by months." I was bluffing. I hadn't spoken to anyone on the zoning board, but Thomas wouldn't know that, and from the way his expression changed, I knew I'd hit a nerve. "You son of a bitch," he hissed. "You're trying to sabotage me because of Laura?" "I'm not trying to do anything," I said calmly. "I'm just a concerned citizen asking questions about a major development in my community. Isn't that what responsible neighbors do?" Thomas leaned across the table. "Stay out of my business, Alex. You've already lost Laura. Don't make this worse for yourself." I smiled for the first time in our conversation. "That sounds remarkably like a threat, Thomas. Are you threatening me?" He sat back, visibly recalculating. "Of course not. I'm giving you friendly advice. Move on. Let Laura go. Let the business stuff alone. It's better for everyone that way." "Better for you, certainly," I agreed. "Not sure it's better for Laura when this house of cards collapses. But then you never really cared about what's best for her, did you?" I stood up, dropping enough cash on the table to cover both our drinks. "Enjoy your evening, Thomas, and maybe start looking for new investors. I hear the Riverside project might be facing some unexpected hurdles." The look of uncertainty on his face as I walked away was the first genuine satisfaction I'd felt in weeks. I didn't confront Laura about the loans. I didn't call Thomas and threaten him further. I simply gathered information, building a complete picture of exactly what was happening and who was involved. Then I called Emily Ford. Emily and I had worked together at Wilson & McKenzie 15 years ago, before I left to start my own company. She'd gone on to become a respected independent attorney with a specialty in family law and financial litigation. More importantly, she was someone I trusted, one of the few people from my past who had no connection to my life with Laura. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe downtown, far from my usual haunts. "You look like hell, Alex," were her first words to me. "Thanks, I feel worse." Emily didn't smile. "What's going on? Your message was cryptic at best." I gave her the condensed version. Marriage falling apart. Wife having an affair with friend. Financial entanglements I just discovered. Needed legal advice on how to protect myself. "Have you confronted them?" she asked after listening carefully. "Partially. She knows I know about the affair. She doesn't know I know about the loans." "Do you want to try counseling? Salvage the marriage?" I looked out the window at people passing by, all of them moving with purpose toward destinations they believed in. There's nothing to salvage, Oshvaj, I said finally, but I don't want to be destroyed in the process. Emily nodded once, businesslike. I'll need to see your prenuptial agreement, all financial records, property deeds, the works. And Alex, she hesitated. This is going to get messy no matter how you handle it. Are you prepared for that? I'm already in the mess, I told her. I'm just trying to find the cleanest way through. What I didn't tell Emily, what I didn't tell anyone, was that I'd already mapped out a path forward. Not just a divorce strategy, but something more comprehensive. Because this wasn't just about ending a marriage. This was about consequences. The first move was subtle. 2 weeks after meeting with Emily, I posted a single photo on Facebook. Nothing dramatic, just Emily and me at a restaurant downtown, dressed nicely, clinking wine glasses. The caption read, "Changes are not always losses. Sometimes they're liberation." It was the first personal thing I'd posted in months. Within minutes, my phone was blowing up with notifications. Friends commenting with confusion and support. Acquaintances liking the post with that voyeuristic enthusiasm people have for potential drama. And Laura called 17 times in a row. When I didn't answer, she started texting, "What the hell is this? Are you seriously trying to make me jealous? Who is she? We need to talk right now." I didn't respond to any of it. The next day, I changed my relationship status from married to it's complicated. Another small move on the chessboard. Laura showed up at my office unannounced that afternoon, barging past my assistant with a fury that would have impressed me if it hadn't been so misplaced. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she demanded, slamming the door behind her. I looked up from my computer, deliberately calm. "Working. What are you doing?" "Don't play dumb, Alex. The photo, the relationship status. You're trying to humiliate me." I leaned back in my chair. Interesting perspective. I post a photo of myself having dinner with a friend, and somehow that's about humiliating you. Is she just a friend? Laura's voice was tight with anger. Because it sure as hell didn't look that way. And you're an expert on what affairs look like, aren't you? She flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. You want to talk about fair? I made a mistake. No, I cut her off. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake is burning dinner. What you did was a choice, multiple choices, made day after day for months. Laura's anger seemed to deflate, leaving her looking small and uncertain in the middle of my office. What do you want from me, Alex? Nothing, I said simply. Not anymore. Is she your lawyer? Laura asked suddenly. The woman in the photo, is that what this is about? You're already planning to divorce me? I didn't answer, which was answer enough. After 15 years, this is how you end it? A Facebook post and a lawyer? No, Laura, I said, finally letting some of my anger show. You ended it in our dining room in front of our friends. You ended it every time you snuck around with Thomas behind my back. You ended it when you brought him into our bed. Don't put this on me. Then I began the financial maneuvers Emily had helped me plan. I froze the joint credit cards, transferred my direct deposits to a new account, and activated the morality clause in our prenuptial agreement, a provision Laura had signed without much thought 6 years earlier, probably assuming infidelity would never be an issue. A week later, Laura found she could only access a limited portion of our joint funds. That same day, Thomas's business plans began unraveling when his bid for a major project was rejected due to concerns about conflicts of interest. 3 days later, an auditor from First National Bank contacted Laura about discrepancies in the loan guarantee documents she'd signed for Thomas's business ventures. Specifically, there were questions about dates, signatures, and whether she'd been properly advised of her liability. Mrs. Brown, did you consult an independent financial advisor before agreeing to serve as guarantor on these loans? It wasn't that formal. Thomas explained everything. And you understand that as guarantor, you're personally responsible for repayment if Mr. Gray's companies default? The silence on Laura's end of that recorded call spoke volumes. Meanwhile, I continued living my life. I went to work. I had dinner with Emily occasionally, sometimes with her husband Jacob, whom I'd met during our second meeting. I joined a rowing club that practiced on the Mississippi at dawn. I lost 15 pounds. I got a haircut that Laura would have hated. The social dominoes began falling next. It started with Michelle, Laura's closest friend since college. They'd been inseparable for years, raising their kids together, vacationing together. Michelle sent Laura a text that Laura later forwarded to me in a fury. "I saw the videos, Elle. I can't believe you would do this to Alex. I need some space from our friendship right now." The videos. I'd been selective, sending only the most irrefutable evidence to a very small circle of people who needed to know. Not the intimate moments. I wasn't interested in humiliating Laura that way, but enough to make the situation crystal clear. Michelle, Laura's brother Kevin, our couple friends, the Harmons. One by one, Laura's social circle contracted, not because I asked anyone to choose sides, but because the truth has its own gravity. Thomas's life was imploding in parallel. The loans he'd taken out began coming under increased scrutiny. An anonymous tip, not from me, though I had my suspicions, led to a tax audit of his last 3 years of returns. His business partners, sensing trouble, began distancing themselves. Rumors circulated in business circles about his methods, his connections, his credibility. I watched it all from a distance, neither gloating nor intervening. I simply let consequences unfold at their own pace. 4 months after that birthday dinner, I filed for divorce. The papers were delivered to Laura at our house, still our house legally, though I hadn't set foot in it since that first week. Emily handled everything, making sure the filing included all the evidence necessary to activate the morality clause in our prenup. Laura's lawyer contacted me directly, against protocol, sounding slightly desperate. "Mr. Brown, my client is willing to discuss a more equitable settlement than what your filing suggests. Perhaps we could meet informally?" "All communication should go through my attorney," I said. "Yes, but Ms. Ford is taking a very aggressive position. Surely there's room for a more compassionate approach." "Compassion," I repeated. "That's an interesting word choice. Your wife acknowledges her mistakes." "Ex-wife," I corrected. "Or she will be soon. And they weren't mistakes. They were choices. Choices have consequences." 2 weeks later, I walked into the Hennepin County Family Court for our first hearing. Emily had warned me it would be contentious. Laura had hired Richard Stanton, a divorce attorney known for his aggressive tactics and theatrical courtroom presence. He specialized in high-asset divorces and had a reputation for emotional manipulation of judges and juries alike. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, more intimate. Laura sat on the opposite side with Stanton, dressed conservatively in a navy blue suit that made her look professional and vulnerable at the same time. A calculated choice, no doubt. She didn't meet my eyes as I walked in. Thomas wasn't there, another calculated decision. His presence would only have strengthened my case. Judge Patricia Callahan entered, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with short gray hair and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She reviewed the preliminary filings with an unreadable expression before addressing the court. "I've reviewed the initial motions in this case, and I have to say I'm concerned by the tone of the proceedings already. Mr. Stanton, your motion to invalidate the prenuptial agreement on grounds of duress seems questionable at best." Stanton rose, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, my client was not properly represented when the agreement was updated 6 years ago. The addition of the morality clause was inserted without adequate explanation of its implications." Emily stood next. "Your Honor, if I may, Mrs. Brown had independent counsel throughout the prenuptial process, both initially and during the update. She has a business degree and was an active participant in Mr. Brown's company for years. The suggestion that she didn't understand what she was signing is frankly insulting to her intelligence." I suppressed a smile. Emily's approach was perfect, defending Laura's intelligence while using it against her. The judge nodded. "Mr. Stanton, do you have any evidence that Mrs. Brown was coerced or that the clause was misrepresented?" "Your Honor, the clause itself is punitive and designed to—" "That wasn't my question, Counselor. Did your client have independent legal representation when signing the agreement?" Stanton hesitated. "Yes, but—" "And did she express any objections to the clause at the time?" "No, Your Honor, but—" "Then I'm inclined to uphold the validity of the prenuptial agreement as written." Judge Callahan adjusted her glasses. Now, regarding the evidence of infidelity, Ms. Ford, I understand you have submitted video evidence? Emily nodded. Yes, Your Honor. We have multiple recordings that clearly establish Mrs. Brown's infidelity with Mr. Thomas Gray. Recordings made illegally, Stanton interjected. Your Honor, my client's privacy was violated by hidden cameras installed without her knowledge or consent. This is a clear violation of Minnesota's privacy laws, and such evidence should be excluded. The judge turned to Emily. Counselor? Emily remained unflappable. Your Honor, the home in question is solely in Mr. Brown's name. The cameras were installed in common areas of his property. Furthermore, Minnesota is a single-party consent state for recordings, and Mr. Brown, as the homeowner, provided that consent. The bedroom is not a common area, Stanton argued. The camera in question was pointed at the door, not the bed, and was installed for security purposes, Emily countered smoothly. Additionally, we have other evidence that doesn't rely on the recordings. Credit card statements showing hotel charges, phone records, and witness statements. The legal battle continued for nearly 2 hours, with Stanton growing increasingly aggressive and Emily remaining methodically calm. Laura alternated between looking outraged and defeated, occasionally whispering frantically to her attorney. At one point, Stanton attempted to paint me as controlling and emotionally abusive, a narrative that Laura seemed all too eager to support on the stand. He always needed to know where I was, she testified, her voice trembling slightly. He monitored my spending, questioned my friends. I felt trapped. And did Mr. Brown ever prevent you from pursuing your own interests? Stanton asked. He said he supported my Instagram career, but he would make little comments, undermining me, asking when I was going to get a real job again, making me feel like what I was doing wasn't important. And your relationship with Mr. Gray, how did that develop? Laura dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Thomas appreciated me. He valued my opinions, encouraged my dreams. He made me feel seen in a way Alex hadn't in years. Stanton nodded sympathetically. And these cameras Mr. Brown installed, how did you feel when you discovered them? Violated, Laura said firmly, terrified. I didn't know how long he'd been watching me, what he'd seen. It felt like a form of abuse. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke simply and directly. I loved my wife. I trusted her. I supported her decision to leave her teaching career to pursue her interests. I never restricted her spending. In fact, the credit card statements show quite the opposite. I never questioned her friendships until I had reason to believe she was being unfaithful. And did you install cameras in your home without Mrs. Brown's knowledge? Judge Callahan asked. Yes, I admitted. After I witnessed inappropriate physical contact between my wife and Mr. Gray at our dinner table, in our home, I wanted to know the truth. I installed security cameras in my own property for the purpose of gathering divorce evidence. I met the judge's gaze steadily for the purpose of confirming whether my marriage was a lie. Emily then produced financial records showing that far from restricting Laura's spending, I had provided her with a monthly allowance of $5,000 for personal expenses, separate from household costs. She introduced emails where I had encouraged Laura's Instagram pursuits, even paying for photography equipment and social media coaching. Most damaging to Laura's narrative, Emily called Michelle to the stand. Reluctantly, visibly uncomfortable, Michelle testified that Laura had often complained not about my controlling behavior, but about my emotional distance and workaholic tendencies, a far cry from the abusive portrait Laura had painted. Did Mrs. Brown ever express fear of her husband? Emily asked. No, Michelle said quietly. Never. She was frustrated with him sometimes, but not afraid. And in your observation of their relationship over the years, did Mr. Brown ever attempt to isolate Mrs. Brown from friends or family? No, if anything, he encouraged her social life. He was always telling her to go out, have fun, maintain her friendships. As the hearing continued, Stanton's tactics grew more desperate. He introduced a psychiatrist who had never met me, but was willing to speculate about patterns of behavior consistent with narcissistic tendencies. He brought in a financial expert who tried to argue that my business success had been largely due to Laura's early contributions, entitling her to a substantial portion of its current value. Emily dismantled each argument methodically. She had my complete business records, showing Laura's limited role in the company's growth. She had testimony from mutual friends about Laura's frequent complaints that I worked too much and didn't control her enough, directly contradicting her current claims. By the end of the day, Judge Callahan seemed visibly irritated with Stanton's theatrical approach. "Counselor," she said sharply when he attempted to introduce yet another speculative expert, "this court is interested in facts, not conjecture. Unless your next witness has direct knowledge of the matters at hand, I suggest you reconsider." The hearing ended with the judge taking the matter under advisement, but her direction was clear. The prenuptial agreement would likely be upheld. As we left the courtroom, Laura approached me in the hallway, Stanton trailing behind her with a look of alarm. "You're destroying everything," she hissed, close enough that I could smell her perfume, the same scent I'd bought her for Christmas the previous year. "No, Laura," I said quietly. "You did that all by yourself." "Mrs. Brown," Emily intervened smoothly, "any communication should go through counsel." Laura ignored her, her eyes fixed on mine. "You'll regret this, Alex, when you're alone and realize what you've thrown away." "What I threw away?" I laughed, genuinely amused by her delusion. "That's an interesting interpretation of events." "Laura," Stanton warned, placing a hand on her arm. "Not here." She shook him off. "You think you've won? You think this makes you the better person?" "I don't care about being the better person," I told her honestly. "I care about surviving what you did to me." The second hearing, 3 weeks later, was much shorter. Judge Callahan had reviewed all the evidence and made her decision. The prenuptial agreement was valid and enforceable. The morality clause was triggered by Laura's infidelity, which the court found had been established by preponderance of evidence. In practical terms, this meant Laura would receive exactly what the prenup specified in case of infidelity: 20% of our communal assets, none of my business holdings, and no alimony. The house had to be sold, with proceeds divided according to the same 80-20 split. Laura sat stone-faced as the judge delivered her ruling. Stanton immediately announced their intention to appeal, but it was a hollow threat. The ruling was solidly grounded in contract law, and the evidence was overwhelming. As we left the courthouse, reporters who had gotten wind of the high-asset divorce with its scandalous elements waited on the steps. Emily had prepared me for this possibility and guided me toward a side exit. Laura, however, chose to walk right through them, head high. I watched from a distance as she made a brief statement, playing the role of the wronged woman who had made one mistake and was being punished disproportionately by a vindictive husband. The performance was impressive, but the facts weren't on her side. That evening, sitting in my apartment with a glass of whiskey, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a hollow completeness, like a circle finally closed. The next morning, reality continued to close in on Laura and Thomas. His project failed spectacularly when the primary investors pulled out after learning of the loan irregularities. The bank began proceedings against him and, by extension, against Laura as his guarantor. She would spend years digging out from under that financial rubble. The most surprising twist came a week after the final divorce decree. Thomas, facing financial ruin and potential criminal charges for loan fraud, turned on Laura. He claimed in a formal statement to the bank's investigators that she had been fully aware of the nature of the documents she was signing, that she had, in fact, been a willing partner in his business dealings. Laura's frantic call came at midnight. "Did you know?" she demanded, her voice raw. "Did you know he would throw me under the bus?" "I didn't know," I said truthfully, "but I'm not surprised. He's saying I knew everything, that I was part of it all. They're talking about pressing charges, Alex. There was a time when her distress would have moved me, when I would have stepped in to protect her. That time had passed. Maybe you should hire a good criminal defense attorney," I suggested. "I hear Richard Stanton does some work in that area." "How can you be so cold?" "Practice," I said. "I learned from the best." Through it all, I never raised my voice, never sent angry texts, never made accusations in public. I simply set events in motion and then stepped aside, letting natural consequences do what they would. 6 months after that birthday dinner, I was sitting in my new office in Atlanta, where I'd relocated to expand my business into the Southeast market. My phone buzzed with a text from Kevin, Laura's brother. "She's back teaching at Riverside Elementary, living in a 1-bedroom apartment. Thought you'd want to know. I didn't respond immediately. I looked out at the Atlanta skyline, so different from the Minneapolis, and thought about cycles of destruction and rebuilding. Finally, I texted back, I hope she finds what she's looking for. It was true. Despite everything, I didn't wish Laura ongoing misery. I just needed her to experience the full impact of what she'd done before she could move forward. Some lessons can only be learned through loss. As for Thomas, I heard through business circles that he'd relocated to Phoenix, trying to rebuild his reputation with moderate success. His legal troubles had been resolved through a plea deal that left him with community service and probation rather than jail time. Our paths would likely never cross again, which was for the best. There are some betrayals that can never be addressed directly without diminishing yourself in the process. Dating again was stranger than I'd expected. The first few attempts were awkward, conversations stilted by my own hesitation. But eventually I met Rachel, a corporate attorney with a sharp mind and an easier laugh than I deserved. We took things slowly, both of us carrying baggage from previous relationships. You're different than you were a year ago, Emily commented during one of her visits to Atlanta. Harder in some ways, more open in others. Is that good or bad? I asked. She considered the question seriously. It's just true. You survived something that would have broken many people. You did it without becoming cruel. That's something. A year to the day after that fateful birthday dinner, I was on a small chartered plane flying over the Serengeti. I decided to combine business with pleasure, exploring investment opportunities in East Africa while taking the safari I'd always promised myself. Through the window, I watched elephants moving like gray ships across the golden plains. My phone had no signal here, no connection to the life I'd left behind, but I didn't need external validation anymore. The quiet satisfaction of having navigated through betrayal without becoming bitter or broken was enough. That night at a luxury camp under stars so bright they seemed artificial, I sat by a fire with a glass of whiskey in my hand. A woman from the tour group, a marine biologist from Vancouver, asked what had brought me to Africa. I considered the question carefully before answering. Let's just say I had to lose everything to figure out what I actually needed, I told her, and it wasn't what I thought. She nodded as if she understood perfectly. Sometimes the best things in life come after the worst things fall apart. I raised my glass to that, to new beginnings, to the strange alchemy that transforms humiliation into determination, betrayal into clarity, endings into opportunities. They had laughed in my face that night, thinking they'd taken everything from me. But in the end, their laughter had freed me to build something better from the ruins, something that was truly mine. And that was a victory no one could ever take away.